I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. With my sister up in the Sierra Nevadas, I could only FaceTime with my son in Boston. On Wednesday, on FaceTime, he announced that he would be making a pumpkin pie from scratch. This was his second pie in his 26 years on the earth. So, of course, I offered to help. I texted him a shopping list, which included all the ingredients, as well as a pastry blender and a pie pan. And off he went to the grocery store, came back again with a cake pan, back to the grocery store again, switched it out for a pie pan, and he was ready to begin. Immediately, he met with challenges because in his apartment there was no reliable measuring cup. There was a measuring cup, but no markings on it, so we couldn't tell if it was a quarter or a third or a half. And so then we Googled how many tablespoons in a half cup, thinking that he could just put tablespoons of flour in until it filled it, and then we could establish the measure, except he didn't have a tablespoon or a teaspoon. But we used regular dining spoons and broke that code. But then, when it was time to roll out the pastry, no rolling pin. So he did have a nice bottle of wine that he was planning to bring to Thanksgiving dinner. So he used that to roll out the pastry and then wiped it down afterwards. As you can see, my son met with one obstacle after another. Making a pie in his apartment was a project bordering on the impossible. And yet here's my takeaway. At each stage of the process, trip to the grocery store, second trip to the grocery store, improvising, measuring cups and measuring spoons, and even a rolling pin, my son never lost hope. He kept his head up, engaging with each difficulty as it arose, tackling challenges one by one. What could easily have felt like an utter pie apocalypse, pie-pocalypse, if you will, turned instead into a kind of adventure. Today's passage from Luke is called The Little Apocalypse, and it's filled with dire warnings of a future world in crisis. Jesus says there will be signs in the sun, the moon, the stars, on the earth, distress among nations, confused by the roaring of the sea and the waves. People will faint from fear and foreboding of what is coming upon the world, and for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. In our own chaotic world right now, with wars raging on 3 continents, and always, it seems, more disasters and heartbreak than we can fathom, it's tempting to say that this apocalypse is coming now, that maybe it's even already here. Maybe you've said something like that yourself. Is it, though? This warning we hear this morning is coming from Jesus in a sermon that he preached thousands of years ago, right before the Last Supper, as he faced the crisis of his own coming death. A death which, through the world-changing power of his resurrection, would overcome death, the power of death, forever. A crisis transformed. And I'll bet that members of every generation since that time have asked themselves, is this crisis that we are experiencing right now, this natural disaster, this war, this upheaval, the final apocalypse that Jesus described? The end of everything? Because in each age, people have faced unbearable things. During plagues, they must have asked, as we asked, Is this the end? During the Great War, they must have asked. During World War II, they must have asked, is this the end of life as we know it? So many things about God and God's plan we cannot understand any more than Jesus' disciples could understand. We don't know when the final end will come. When, as Jesus describes, the Son of Man will be coming in a cloud of power and great glory. But we know storms and crises and conflicts now. We can read the signs of a world that's struggling now. And even though we do not understand the details of God's time or God's plan, we can try to be ready even now. And best of all, we know redemption now. We experience this in our lives now. We know how it feels to be held by God now. Right after Jesus tells his disciples, the Son of Man will be coming in a cloud with power and great glory, so that we can stand before the Son of Man and be judged, he offers a way to be ready. Even though it can feel like an overwhelming storm and we can easily succumb to fear and anxiety, he says, stand up and raise your heads because your redemption is drawing near. Again, we don't know how and we don't know when. But isn't it incredible to know this? Our redemption is drawing near. Our ultimate redemption, because already we are redeemed by Jesus' death and resurrection to new life, and someday more redemption will come. We hear that on that day, people will faint from fear and foreboding of what is coming upon the world. Or in an old translation, and I love this, the courage of many will falter because of what they see. And sometimes our courage falters now because of what we see. And yet, what if it doesn't falter? What if we don't faint? What if we keep our eyes open instead, our heads raised instead? What if we walk into the storms of life, including the last, whenever it comes, knowing that just as every beautiful dimension of this life on earth that we live is God, the storms are God also. I don't want to walk into storms. I love harmony and not upheaval. And I bet you're the same way. And yet, who knows what we can learn in and through crisis? Think about the perils that you face, the ones that you're encountering right now in your life. And think about this. In what ways can you practice lifting up your head? In what ways can you practice a kind of constant readiness? And through all of it, what can you learn? Back for a moment to, well, from a world perpetually on fire to my son's near pie apocalypse. The pie itself turned out well. In fact, in his words, the people at his Thanksgiving meal that he attended, quote, heaped some praise on it. And then, this isn't a text. He also texted me. He said, Another guest brought a pie with a store-bought crust. And then he added in his text the letters SMH. I had to look them up. It means shaking my head. So a pie snob is born. I'd like, metaphorically speaking, to offer you a prayer for effortlessly perfect pies in life. But as my sister wisely comments, why do they say easy as pie? Pies are hard. And they are. They take 2 hours and mess up your kitchen. So here's my prayer for you instead as we enter the season of Advent, the beginning of the church year, our pathway into Christmas. May every calamity you face offer learning and growth. And in the midst of it, may you stand up and raise your head and be ready. Amen.